I'm Mike Desjardins, and this is another episode of Conversations with Leaders, a series of podcasts with inspiring leaders that I've met throughout my travels over the past 20 years of being engaged and involved in the leadership development industry. Today, I am so happy to have my dear friend, Tana Heminsley, here to chat with us. Tana and I have known each other back since 2007, and we got the unique opportunity to spend over 10 years working together at my company, Virtus. That's what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about you and your experience of authentic leadership. So maybe what you can do, Tana, is share with everyone a little bit about your background and why authentic leadership.
Well, it's really wonderful to be here on several different levels, Mike, as a friend and as a colleague. And my story, okay, how much time do we have? Right now, I'm actually in retirement from leadership coaching and facilitation. I built a leadership company, started in 2005. When I left BC Hydro and my executive job there, that was my last executive job, in business over 35 years. And in parallel with that, I was always an entrepreneur. And in parallel with that, I had my own personal journey. So you asked about why authentic leadership. And I was thinking about that. And so I struggled a lot in my formative years, and as an emerging leader also. And it was when I was in retail working for Fairweather years and years ago in the fashion industry that I realized that I was consciously trying to be like my boss, the regional manager, who was very good at what she did and completely opposite of my style. And when I tried to be like Carol, I was very unsuccessful. And I remember the stats coming in, right? And it was just not working. And
Right.
I had a team of 35 and a Pacific Center flagship store downtown. And something shifted for me where I started to realize, what do I want to do here? What legacy do I want to leave? How do I want to hang out with these amazing people that I had working with me? And how could I support them? And so I started shifting into being much more thoughtful and letting go of Carol, listening to her guidance, and also coming up kind of with my own way of doing things. And I started to see results, and that was really exciting, both for me and for the team. So that was kind of my first experience of it. And authentic leadership gave me a language to describe how I was trying to be in the world and what had been very tricky for me over the years. So it was really easy for me to be a chameleon and to fit myself and contort myself into what I felt others needed me to be. So I took on more and more executive roles and more on my shoulders. And I remember a colleague coming in saying, you look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. What are you doing? You do not need to take on another group.
Yeah.
And so I had this personal journey of recovery from some childhood stuff that had gone on, and becoming aware and being very choiceful and intentional, and also really cleaning up my act personally and my ethics, and keeping my integrity to myself as well as others was a huge part of what got me to the point where I liked myself, I respected myself. I could then support others as a leader of others. And so I have this journey. Just I've never talked to anyone about it like this before. Mike, you always do this to me.
Well, and it's interesting because we've known each other a long time, and I don't even know how many conversations deep conversations you and I have had, and yet I still feel like I'm peeling off the layers of the onion and getting to know you better. I want to just jump back to something. It's interesting you brought up Carol, because I think that it's easy to point to leaders that we think, oh, I don't want to be like that person because I don't like their style. I don't believe in their moral compass, or they're amoral, or they're unethical. So I think it's easy to point that out and say, well, I'm trying not to be like that person. What you bring up is really interesting, which is, we have these mentors or these bosses or leaders in our lives, and we think, oh, I want to emulate some of their behaviors because I have a great deal of respect for them, or I see they're very successful, so thus I should do things or be the way they are. And I think what I love about what you described there is that in the effort to do so, just as much as I might be trying to not be like somebody I don't want to be like, which would be inauthentic if I went that way, but I'm not going to go that way. That's easy because I feel repulsed or repelled by that behavior. But in terms of moving towards things, or moving towards a personality or style that I actually admire, appreciate, and am inspired by, I can actually not be in my authenticity just in the same way. And it's interesting because that's a lot harder, I think, to recognize. And, as you mentioned, the time that it took you to figure that out, to figure out, well, who are you then? Well, if I don't want to be this person, and I aspire to be as successful as this person, but I can't be that person because that's not me. So then who am I? I'm this person who wants to show up in my authenticity, but how do I get there? So I want to go down that road, but I want to touch on one other thing you said. So when people meet you for the first time, or people that I know meet you for the first time, and they ask me about you, they always say, Tana has this way about her that is just so lovely. She's so centered and calm and peaceful and emotionally intelligent and intelligent. And it's just so lovely to be in her presence. Like, how did she get this way? And and Sabrina, actually, my wife, was one of the people who asked me about that when she first met you. And I've said to everyone that's asking, like, how is Tana this way? I'm like, well, it's for Tana to tell you her story. I'm not going to share with you her story, but I will say that oak trees with deep roots that go through hard ground aren't trees that grew because the weather was great and the soil was lovely and everything was perfect. They grew deep roots and strong trunks and vibrant branches, which you may see the swaying in the wind and the beautiful branches and the lovely leaves, but you're missing the fact that all of that is grounded with deep roots and a solid trunk. And that's the best description I can give you of Tana, is she's an oak tree. But it's up to her to tell you about how the roots got there and the part about the trunk. I can tell you, you're already witnessing and seeing the beautiful colors in the leaves and the lovely branches and the shade that she creates to protect people in the world, and the authenticity that shines through. But you ask her and she'll tell you about her story. Let's talk about this journey through authenticity. I mean, you've written 3 books on the topic. The most recent one just got released actually recently, a couple weeks ago. And just for those viewers, it's Monday, October the 5th, 2020, when I say a couple of weeks ago. So you've written these 3 books, and I want to talk about the books, but let's maybe lead in through the piece of conversation that I left off earlier, which is I can't be Carol, and I don't want to be these leaders that I see that I don't respect. So I'm trying to find my authenticity. Where do I even start as a leader to try to figure out authentically, who am I?
Great question. And for me, it was a process of recovery over time and healing old stuff, and being very intentional, trying some things out and realizing, oh, that doesn't feel right for me, then trying a different way. And authenticity is both a way of being, and it's an ongoing practice. I don't know if there's ever an outcome. Talk about it as being more of the time, not all of the time. So I'm human, and I will not be, there are certain situations where I still find it very difficult, and I'm triggered by certain personalities, some of which we've had some very good conversations about as I've needed coaching from you.
So then perfection then is the enemy of progress, I guess.
Yes.
In authenticity.
Yes. And comparison is also. And so this is about me on my path to becoming myself, rediscovering myself, to letting go of the layers of the egoic mind, of the traumas that all of us, many of us, have experienced in one way or another, and cleaning up our acts, becoming who we are, standing firm in our beliefs, particularly when others will disagree with them. So it's not being the chameleon anymore. It's being, the oak tree. What a lovely metaphor. Thank you. I feel very honored. And yeah, it's standing my ground and saying what I believe, even when, and particularly when, others will disagree with me and it may not be right for them.
I've had the personal experience of that. So I think one of my leadership edges is that I'm a people pleaser. And I think the challenge that I've always faced is that being a people pleaser means I need people to like me. And so when I show up authentically, I've been in relationship with people who are very threatened by how I show up in the world. Like, nobody really talks like that. Nobody really acts like that. And they have this belief around, they compare themselves to me in ways, and I think and they say, you're not really like that. I'm like, well, I am really like this. Like, I've worked really hard. I've worked really hard on myself. I've done a ton of personal development and counseling and meditation and journaling. Like, I've worked really, and I work with people like Tana, I have these wonderful people in my lives who've helped me develop as a person. And there's this reaction, like, you can't be that way. And it hurts me in my soul because it makes me feel like this person is saying I'm an imposter. And I'm not. And what I've had to learn is that me being authentic means some people are not going to like that and are going to have a huge difficulty with how I show up in the world. And so what I've needed to learn is empathy for them. Like, whatever took them to this place where they're having a difficulty witnessing how I show up in the world. So I empathize with whatever that history is, but I have very strong boundaries around how to be what's okay for me in relationship. And that includes removing people from my life, which I had to learn how to do, which as a people pleaser is really difficult, because then I think to myself, there's people out there in the world that are like mad at me or don't like me or something or other, right? Because I've decided not to have them in my life. And that along the journey to authenticity for me as I'm self-described people pleaser has been very, very challenging. And I feel it at, like, even describing this to you, I can feel the emotions coming up for me. And like, it's how hard it is to say that, right? And to know that that's true, because I don't want to be that way. I wish I was more like Teflon, like it just sort of rolled off me and I didn't care, but I cared deeply, and I cared deeply in relationship. And it makes it challenging. It made it challenging to be in my authenticity. And as I've gotten older, I've learned that there are lots of people that it will work for. And those are the people that I want to have closer to me. And it doesn't work for you, that's cool, but you're blocking, you're standing in the doorway and you're blocking traffic for the people that I do want to have in my life.
It's a very important learning that I think each of us has to undertake at times, and a really helpful one, a powerful learning, is that I can try my best at being in relationship, and then I can let it go and wish them well.
Mm-hmm.
And we're on separate journeys, and it can be very tough at times. Absolutely. It's still very tough in certain situations. Why doesn't that person want to hang out with me? You know, I'm like this little puppy from Revelstoke. I want to be friends with everyone.
Or why is this person so, like, that you can just see they are struggling,
Mm-hmm.
and why is that being pointed at me? Like, I didn't do anything, so why are you pointing that at me? And I've gotten to the empathy place, that last place to still struggle with sometimes, which is the wishing them well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of times when I'm just good riddance and go off, right? And the wishing them well, I think that's Brene Brown that definitely fits within her lexicon and her teachings. And I know that in some cases, letting go of that grudge, the whole swallowing poison, hoping the other person dies,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but letting that go and letting them be, and then just moving forward, the people pleasing thing and the need to be loved just like kicks in so much in that space.
Mm-hmm.
So how does one? So maybe we should transition into the book, because I feel like we're about to have the conversation, which is the reason you wrote the books in the first place. So tell me about, because what I love about the books is that they are incredibly practical in nature. So there's lots of books on the market right now. You read them and you're kind of like, okay, well, I read it and I understand the theory. But as a person, I'm pretty much in the same place I am when I started reading this. And now I've got to go try to distill what I learned and try to apply it. And your books are not written that way. My experience of your books is that they're a journey. They are like a choose your own adventure story in terms of how I want to engage. So tell me about that. Tell me about why you decided to write the books in that format, and then what your experience, because the books are out in the world and all these people around the world have read them and used them. So tell me what the experience has been like, as it's been reflected back to you from the people who've actually had a chance to do the books.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so there's three, you're right. So the first one, foundational one, so after working with, I think I worked with 13 coaches and counselors over the years on my own personal journey, and wanted, if I could support. So my books are for people who are at the entry point to doing their own personal work. And I'm okay with that. They're meant to show people that we have an option, we have a choice, and there can be so much more quality of life and so much more joy and so much more ease and less stress if we stand in our truth and figure out what that is and kind of calibrate our inner compass. So the first one is about that. It's about context. What is authentic leadership, and how do I get on this path? How do I start? And so there's a couple of ways of starting. And the first and the one that I found most profound is to create a personal awakening through a process of self-reflection. And one of the things about being authentic is reclaiming choice. So remembering that at all moments I have a choice in how I think about something, how I respond to something, and how I choose to live my life. When I realized that I was happier when I was driving the bus, when I was making the choices rather than allowing life to happen to me. That was a very powerful moment. And so I tried to write down the context and the steps and slip in a bit of spirituality. Chapter 10. Chapter 10, right? Is why am I really doing this? Really trying to get people to do their work so that collectively we support the enhancing of the collective consciousness in the world. So if I do my work, I support others to do their work as well. And collectively we become more ethically as a human race. We become more compassionate as a human race as we raise the bar in our way of being, in our way of relating to ourselves, in our way of relating to others. And so that's why I wrote this first book. and to make it very practical so that anyone, any age, and it's focused on the corporate world, and it's useful outside of corporate as well, is just how do I, go through the steps and try this out and get really clear about who am I, that big existential question that occurs when I realize I don't want to be like this one and I really want to be like this one, but that's not who I am. Right. Then I've got this void and cognitive dissonance that happens. Well, then who am I? And so reclaiming our true self, our best self, our authentic self, and making more choices in every day can be done through a process, 9-step process, and then through an ongoing, as you know, practices of awareness and continuous awakenings and deepening awareness, and then behaviors in ways that are aligned with this this strong inner moral guidance system.
So we finished book 1.
Book 1. Yeah, that took me 8 years. So I wrote that from 2005 to 2013, and I had to sell myself on it first. So I had to test the material, had to use it with clients, I had to get feedback, and then I wanted. People had said, well, I want a place with more space, bigger pages that I can actually write in the book. So this book's a bit small. Yeah. So then I did number 2, which is the journal.
Right.
And for some reason, I was into writing poetry in 2008. So I got poetry about authenticity from this time in my life. So I've added in the poetry. Yeah. So, and also added in the 10 kind of big learnings that I had over the years that I wanted to add in to update. So that was the second one.
If someone has not read book 1, can they start in the journal, or are they going to find it challenging to start at that place?
They can go right into the journal, although the first one is nice to refer to. So it does, in the journal, I do refer to the first book. So the first book will give you the context and the why and the how in detail. The journal will give you the place to write it down in depth. And what was important for me also is we evolve over time, as you know. And so there's space for 5 iterations, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. However often I need to sit down and sort of something big has happened and I need to recalibrate what's going on for me, re-look at my values and what is my purpose in life and my vision for my life and my inner development plan. So one of the things that's different about a goal setting book and these books is this whole inner development plan. So if I want to become a great leader and a better communicator, then there's some stuff that I have to look at internally. I have a strong inner critic. I make judgments and assumptions. I have some personal work to do around my relationship building. So that inner development plan is a piece of the process as well, and one of the steps in the book and the first book and the journal.
I think that's well said. The first book's very easy to get through. I mean, your writing style is very fluid, and it's not like trying to read Gary Zukav, where I don't know how many times I reread one of his paragraphs in Seat of the Soul, and I'm like, I just don't even understand what you're trying to say here. So, it's very fluid, and it does help to have that. In my experience, it does help to have the grounding of book 1, so that looking at the questions in the journal, I can think back to what I was reflecting on when I first read the book, book 1. So book 1 set the stage. Book 2, journal and do the work. Why book 3?
Well, that's a great question. So this one took me 14 years to write. And it started in 2006 when I left BC Hydro, and I started a dinner series where we would get together. It started as a group of women, and it became co-ed, and we would have conversations. And I saw some topics that weren't being talked about in in leadership development courses, things like how to live from the 3 centers of intelligence, not just from the thinking mind, how to navigate transitions from an internal moral compass perspective rather than an external focus. How do I manage my inner critic? How do I cultivate joy at work? And I mean, many of the, and I was thinking about Virtus too, because a lot of the, so there's 18 worksheets in here. So I really like to be practical. And I think I think when I was at BC Hydro early in my career, someone said to me, "You're too theoretical." And I'm like, well, let's see about
Watch this.
Watch this. And I also remember when I was becoming a leadership coach, my teacher saying, "Tana, get really specific on your practices, on the way you articulate practices for your clients." Because I was very vague. And she said, "You can't go to the doctor and get a prescription and the doctor says, well, just take it whenever you want to. If you don't feel well, take a couple of things, pop them, see how you do." She said, "You have to be very specific." And so I created these action worksheets, many of which I was reflecting this morning, we used at Virtus over the years. And we also use the personal planning system that's in book 1 and book 2 with many of my coaching clients. And so what I heard from them is, I remember I have clients who have come back 4 or 5 iterations over the lifetime of their career. "I just need a tune-up. Can you just take me through this again, please? And I want to focus on this area, and this is where I'm having some issues." And so that was the first 2. So the third book I compiled because what I realized is that so you do the first 2 books, you get really clear on who you are and your inner moral guidance system, your inner moral compass, and then you go out in the world and you try to be that way. You try to be authentic in some situations. You kind of get kicked down. You realize, oh, that didn't work so well, and there's benefit in ongoing practice in cultivating more skills from using a lens of authenticity and emotional intelligence. And I look at authenticity as building on emotional intelligence. So an emotionally intelligent leader who has a strong ethical core is an authentic leader.
So an emotionally intelligent leader who has a strong moral and ethical core is an authentic leader.
Yes. So I think of it as an equation. So EI plus ethics equals authenticity.
Love it. I love the simplicity of that.
Yes. So you can have a leader who knows exactly what they're doing and is managing by fear and is very emotionally intelligent. If they're authentic, they will not do that. They will override the ego to do the right and ethical thing, and they will stop that practice. Managing by fear, for example. If they can be emotionally intelligent and not be an authentic leader, is what I'm trying to say. So authenticity takes it up a notch in terms of ethics from a global perspective. So taking universal values and what is right for humanity at the biggest levels, and how can I live my life and make choices and develop these skills so that everything that I do has this ripple effect on the people around me when I come in and show up as myself. And that ripple effect affects their family and the community and the world and the universe. There's my spiritual piece.
I love it. So there was a piece I was reading, doing research lately on sociopaths and psychopaths in the workplace. And one of our colleagues, Ray Williams, is writing a book about empathy and a lack of empathy in the workplace, and running into people that are sociopaths. And there's some fantastic literature on it. A book called Outsmarting a Psychopath Next Door. And the psychopath or sociopath next door. Outsmarting the sociopath next door. The interesting thing is that there's if the population is 1% has tendencies in those areas, it's 10% in leadership and business. The thing that I read that was the most striking to me recently is they found sociopaths, so those people that would normally be referred to as lacking in empathy. And so their self-regulation and is not controlled by empathy in any way. It is ego-focused, and it is self-centered and self-serving. They have found sociopaths with high empathy.
Interesting.
The problem is that they're lacking a moral compass. And so they use their empathy skills to control others by understanding what outcomes others are looking for and then manipulating them to get their own way. And that's a terrifying person to run into, because chances are they're going to be charismatic. They're probably going to be a good communicator. And they will appear to be a person with high empathy until you recognize that they are using that empathy to control you. And that research is probably from a leadership perspective, one of the scarier things that I've read in the past number of years. And so when you pointed out the difference in terms of authenticity, being an authentic leader, being EQ plus ethics equals authenticity, that really rings true for me. And I think that for those people that are watching this podcast right now or listening to this podcast, who are wanting to go on their own journey, there's two parts to this. Part one is, what is my journey? And then part two is, how can I witness people who are actually inauthentic, who are attempting to control me in my life? And I think that the more grounded I am in who I am, the less likely I am to be affected by those people. I think there's a great book Harvey McKay wrote called Swim with Sharks. And he said, you can either be shark, right? So the unethical leader, right? You could be shark bait, so the unaware, maybe striving, but unaware leader who is shark bait, or you could be shark proof. And I think that what I love about your approach to authenticity is it is about, growing my emotional intelligence, having a strong ethical core. And then I think that the other piece to it too is having the boundaries around me to know when I've run into individuals who are inauthentic, who are trying to manipulate or control me in some way, and to have the courage to set very strong boundaries. To protect myself and to protect the people around me that might be influenced by those people.
I think that's a really important point. So authenticity doesn't just mean being soft and compassionate. It means being fierce. It means standing up for what we believe in, and sometimes ending a relationship, as you said, sometimes calling someone on their behavior on a phone call with other people on the call, when that person is, the situation needs to be stopped, and not knowing how, and having a good intention to come off of autopilot, get onto manual and a very thoughtful, sometimes slower approach, sometimes quicker, but one that is going to get everybody back on the right path. Because we can be pulled off course so quickly. And the other reason I wrote these books is because I want people to quit being violent against each other. I want people to quit cutting each other's arms off, and the atrocities that happen in the world. If each of us does our work and cultivates, when we're being our authentic self, we're being our best self. Authentic is not an excuse for bad behavior. Well, that's just the way I am. So let me run roughshod over people. That is not authentic. Authentic from and again, maybe more of a spiritual place, is who am I when I can override the unhelpful egoic mind often focused on the negative, in order to do the right and ethical thing from a global perspective.
And interestingly, when you talk about, stop people from cutting people's arms off, I think if we dial it back to even at a base level, the concept of microaggressions, which are where it all starts. I mean, the very base level, it starts with microaggressions. So as you say, either, there's cutting people's arms off, there's cutting people off mid-sentence, there is, in a brainstorming session, debating the merits of somebody's ideas. There is making ideological conflict, which is about the idea and that we disagree on the idea, and then turning it into interpersonal conflict, which is like, I don't like you, and so it doesn't matter what you say. I'm going to make this a personal attack on you to make my position stronger. When it has nothing to do with the position that I have, it has to do with you personally. And I think that, being able to spot that it's difficult. I know, for me, what my journey was really the difference of seeing these things, and I would see them, and I had two choices. I was either passive, so listening and saying, hey, this isn't okay, until the point at which I went, no, like this really isn't okay. And then I had aggression. And I didn't like going there because I got angry and mad. And I would stop in the meeting and this isn't okay. And it wasn't the person I wanted to be. And so I'm like, well, I don't want to be this way. And there's no way I'm standing by. And thankfully, my wife actually is who taught me this, like probably 12 years or 11 years ago. She's like, the thing you're missing the thing in the middle, which is assertiveness. So being able to stand strong in your beliefs, your moral compass, your ethics, to see that something's not okay, to stand up and say something about it, and be assertive without having to go over to the aggression side. Because the problem is when they get to that place of aggression, then people are focused on the aggression and they've lost the context of why it's there. When you're assertive, people stop and listen, and they don't lose the context of the moral and ethical problem that is occurring. They're able to sit there with you and see to themselves, you're right, this isn't right. And I can be there with you, not he's mad or she's mad.
Yeah.
Which is worse, because I think it's much harder in my experience watching friends and colleagues who are female business leaders. If they go to that place of being angry or mad, there is a much different standard that has been applied to them in the past in that space. Whereas a man going there, it's kind of like, well, he's a guy and he's that way.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very different standard. Right. And I think that being able to claim that place in the middle of assertiveness that's a challenging, it took me a while to learn and practice to learn to get good at that skill. And there's still times when as you said at the beginning of this conversation, it isn't about perfection. It's not about trying to be perfectly authentic all the time. There's still times when you feel tested. I know there's times when I feel tested. And those are the times when I feel I have the greatest learning. What I'd love to talk about in the context of authenticity is you have a wonderful model for when people are triggered. And I'd love if you walked us through that process from I'm triggered to my response, and you've got a nice acronym that goes with it. Could you walk us through that and kind of explain so that when somebody's in that situation, they can recognize, I've been triggered by this thing. I know I need to take action, and I don't like the action I normally take. I want to take a new one. And you've got a wonderful process. So I would love for you to explain to people how that process works.
Okay. So it's called the arc of intense energy, and it looks like a wave or an arc. And it's the physiological and thought process that occurs when we are triggered by a situation or a person, and we're startled by it, or we become angry, or we become afraid, and our body goes into one of our three stress responses. It goes into fight, flight, or freeze. And fight is where we want to get aggressive, or we want to move forward, defend ourselves, get angry, louder. Flight is where, which was mine, is I kind of cower and contract my body language, and I want to get out of there, physically or metaphorically. And freeze is I can't decide what to do. I'm just completely like a deer caught in headlights and shocked by the situation and immobilized. So one of those three will occur. And as they're occurring, the intensity, the physiological level of discomfort increases in the body. So this isn't a diagram of peak performance, it's a diagram of peak discomfort. And when the body gets to the point where it cannot manage the level, it cannot tolerate the level of discomfort from the stress that has occurred, the mind will do something to automatically calm the body down and bring it back to a homeostatic balance. And often it's a reaction that we learned as children that worked, in the past, that does not work now. So it's that situation, in the workplace where I think, oh, I really wish I would not have reacted that way. Right? So through awareness and practice, we can start to understand what are the kinds of situations and personality types who trigger us, because there will be patterns. We can start to practice awareness of the physiological responses we have in our stress patterns, the shaky palms, the sweaty palms, the contraction of the shoulders, the shallow breathing, the red flush that comes on the neck and the face, whatever ours are. If we start to pay attention to that, we can start to practice a different response, a more thoughtful response. We can learn to calm the nervous system at will. And this is probably the most important practice that I've learned over my lifetime, to calm the nervous system when I need to, and to lower the cortisol levels, and to bring back the positives, hormones into the body, serotonin and others, and to keep the body mind more balanced, so that I can be more mindful in my responses. So you talked about passive to assertive to aggressive. Well, mine was passive. And so I had to learn to manage my nervous system so that I could and we called it in our emotional intelligence course at Virtus, stand up or stand down. So I had to learn to stand up for myself and be assertive. And those who have a more aggressive stance, or the fight response, have to learn to come back to so we called that stand down. So to calm and to be able to, again, more thoughtfully and intentionally have a response to the situation that we're in. So it's a daily practice. It's, So is there more that I should say about that? Or
no, I love it.
Yeah.
I think the last piece that is the ABC piece of it.
The ABCs. So the ABCs is something to remember in the moment that is simple and practical, as I like to be. So A is awareness, and awareness of, again, the situations and personality types that we're triggered by, awareness of the physiological responses that are your unique patterns, whether it's fight, flight, or freeze, awareness of your automatic response and how you would like to respond. So being able to articulate, this is a new behavior that I want to use. And then B is deepening the breathing. So just slowing and deepening the breathing, and calming yourself. And C is being curious about the other person. Curious is a simple word that you can use that deflects the mind, and allows you to get into the body and to calm the body. So if you can't say anything else, it's just I'm not sure I understand your position on that. It's it's really different than what I was thinking we were going to talk about today. And I'm curious, could you say just a bit more? And the curious is just a cue to continue the breathing and calm down, gives you a moment for the other person to respond so that you can get yourself kind of back together.
Great. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's such a powerful tool to use in the moment. And so, because ABC is easy to remember, and to know that I've been triggered, and that I have choices.
Yes.
And I have either the default, which is the kind of automatic pattern that I run if I don't get curious, or I have this new choice, which is to be aware of it, to take a breath and center myself, and then be curious, as you say. And that curious, I guess, also could stand for choice, because that's a choice I'm making. It's not an automatic pattern. I'm choosing to be curious, and that is an action, not a reaction. It's a response. It's not a reaction. And so I know for myself, I love remembering that. So I wanted to make sure that we covered that today, particularly in the context of talking about authenticity. For people who want to get a copy of the book, who want to stay in touch with you, learn more about authentic leadership, where's the best place for them to go?
Sure. Facebook or LinkedIn under Tana Heminsley. And our website is leadauthentic.com. So leadauthentic.com.
Amazing. Thank you, Tana. Thank you so much, as always, for sharing your time, sharing your heart, sharing your wisdom. I truly appreciate getting the chance to have this conversation with you today.
Another great conversation, Mike. Thank you.
All right. Well, this has been another Conversations with Leaders podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. Go check out Tana's books. Go have the experience with her books. That's the best way I can describe it. Have a great day. We'll see you all soon.